if you're a creator of custom content for Zombicide and you're working with the characters from the Modern Classic First Edition, you're sometimes going to run into a problem with shadows. If you've downloaded the character art in PNG format from whatever source, you'll notice that almost all of the art has shadows, but not all of it. So, for example, the special guest characters do not have shadows, and sometimes the main characters won't, like Ned and Nick here. But for the most part, they all have shadows. So for consistency's sake, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you need to add shadows to art. Um, Now sometimes, depending on the project, you will want to remove shadows because you won't want shadows, but that's pretty straightforward. Adding shadows is a little trickier, so I'm going to show you how I do that on Photoshop here. So I've got a character here who doesn't have a shadow, and what we're going to do is we're going to add one so he looks like this. Now I'm not a Photoshop expert, so there might be an easier way to do this, but this is fast and easy enough, and it works well. So now I could just form the shadow out of my imagination, what I think it would look like, but in this case I have official content that I can use as a reference. So I've got here this character's dashboard, and you can see it does have a shadow. So I'm going to just crop this out and use this as a reference off to the side here as a guide. So to create the shadow for this character, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the layer with the character art. Well, the first thing I should do actually is increase the size of the canvas behind him, just so I don't run off the edge with the shadow once I make it. So I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and I'm just going to make it, let's say, 130% bigger. 30% bigger, I should say. So there he is. I'm going to move him off a little bit because the shadow is going off to the right. So the first thing I need to do is create a copy of this character art layer. So I'm going to press Ctrl J to do that, or you can right click the layer and say duplicate layer. So now I've got a copy, and I'm going to turn it black. So I'm going to double click the layer to get into the styles window and click color overlay, turn it black, and this is going to be the layer that's the shadow of the character. Now obviously it's the shadow, it needs to be behind the character, and I need to make that overlay an integral part of that layer, and so I'm just going to create a fresh blank layer here, put it under the shadow layer, right click the shadow layer and say merge down. And now you can see that black overlay is a permanent part of that layer. So now I've got the shadow, and now I need to form it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the shadow layer selected. I'm going to press Ctrl T on the PC to free transform. You can also do that through the edit menu, free transform. And I'm going to grab the center anchor point at the top here, and I'm just going to drag it down to shorten that shadow. And I can see by looking at the example image that the top of the head comes about just south of the knee. So as you can see, the bottom of the feet have migrated a little, so I'm going to drag that up just to about right there. So now I've got the shadow the right height, but it's not skewed the right direction. So I'm going to go back into my transform menu here to edit regular transform, and I'm going to select perspective, and this is going to allow me to create some perspective on this shadow. So I'm going to grab the top anchor point here, and I'm just going to drag it to the right about that far, and that looks a lot like where this is situated. But now you can see it needs some tapering out as the perspective deepens to match the shadow in the art. So what I'm going to do is grab either one of these corner anchors and pull it towards the center, and you can see that that just thins that up a little bit. Let me just drag this a little closer. So that looks pretty similar to what we have here in the official art. So I'm going to call that shape good. And the next thing I need to do is add the transparency fade to the shadow. This is the part there might be an easier way to do, but this way works well enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my eraser tool and make sure that my shadow layer is selected. And I'm going to make sure my brush is very large. I've got it at over 1500 here, and I'm going to make sure that I'm on the soft edge brush, and I got 100% opacity and flow, and I'm going to put it up to the top of my screen as high as I can get before I lose the cursor. I'm going to hold down the left mouse button, and I'm just going to go back and forth a few times, and you can see it slowly fading out that shadow. And that is pretty much it. This can now be cropped and saved as a new PNG with a shadow, and it's that easy.